Hi there, Emily Midget here with you today from 6th Street Sundries, and today I have a project using my new Celebrate Rose corner that I illustrated for Simon Says Stamp, and it's being released in the April 2022 Happy and Joyful release. I have a watercolor video to do with you today using your Tombow brush markers, and this technique would work with any watercolor or dye-based markers that you might have from any brand. But I'm going to show you today how to get a little bit of extra mileage out of the a limited amount of markers. We're just going to use a few markers here on this project today, but we're going to really get some great depth, and I'll show you how in just a second. I've heat embossed the Celebrate Rose corner onto some Fabriano Artistico cold press watercolor paper, and here I'm just demonstrating. This is one of the techniques that we're going to use to make our markers, to stretch our markers, to make our markers do a little bit more for us. So there's a difference between putting your marker directly to the paper and then scribbling your marker onto like a ceramic palette like I have here, and you mixing that with some water, diluting that color with some water, and making it a little bit less intense, a little bit lighter, and a little bit more pastel. So I have scribbled some, this is just a really bright, vibrant fuchsia color onto my ceramic palette. It's just a plain flat ceramic palette. And I find ceramic palettes like this invaluable when I'm watercoloring with any medium, just because you are able to control the level of intensity of the color so much more easily when you pull that color out of your watercolor palette or off of your pen and use that palette to kind of dilute the color. So I've scribbled some of the color onto that ceramic palette, and I have mixed quite a bit of water in with it. And I'm picking up the color with my damp paintbrush. I've got a silver black velvet paintbrush, and I believe it's a round number 4 size. And I'm just adding color. I put the color where I think that the shadows would be most intense, clean my brush, and pull that color out with the damp paintbrush. Now here, I've done one layer with just that pink. Now we're going to add a little bit of, it's kind of a teal color, and you wouldn't think that teal would mix very well with this kind of purple. You would think that the green and the red in the secondary colors would mix to create kind of a muddy color, but it really works quite nicely. It creates this beautiful like amethyst color. So I've scribbled some of the fuchsia and some of the turquoise onto my ceramic palette, and I'm just mixing them as I go. I don't really have a rhyme or reason as to how much of one versus how much of another. I just kind of mix it until it looks right to my eye, because what we're doing is we're adding some shadows. We're adding some intensity and some shadows to the areas that are kind of, the petals that are kind of tucked behind and tucked underneath. We want to add intensity and contrast to those dark areas so that they are obviously different and obviously more shadowed than the light areas that are on top and closer to the light source. So I am mixing that color as I go, and there is also something to be said for pushing versus pulling. I tend to start, when I lay down my dark color, I will start by laying that down and then cleaning my paintbrush and pulling that color towards me. I'll put the tip of the paintbrush away from me and I'll pull it out towards me. There is also something to be said for pushing the color away from you. If I've pulled too much of that color out and it's too intense, I will use my paintbrush and go the opposite direction and push it back up into the corner where I want those colors to be the most intense. Now here, we're going to demonstrate the effect of putting the pen directly to the paper. This is that same dark fuchsia pink that we started with, and I am putting that directly on the paper, and I am using that damp paintbrush to pull that color out. But that color is so super intense that you don't need to add very much. It just helps to intensify just those tiny little areas where you want that shadow to really be magnified. You want that shadow to be more intense. So I'm putting that marker directly onto the paper, just a touch of it, and I'm pulling that color out with my clean damp paintbrush. And it really does make a big difference in when you add that color directly to the paper in just those tiny little areas. You can see what a difference the intensity is versus the color that you have picked up with your damp paintbrush that's been diluted on your palette and you've picked it up with your damp paintbrush. It really does make such a huge difference. So now we have all of the flowers colored. We've used a variety of the coral and the pink and the purple and the teal for the extra shadows. Now we're just going to color some foliage. I've got like kind of it's almost a fluorescent lime green that I am mixing with that same teal color that we used on the shadows of the flowers themselves. And this is one of the things that I love about color mixing. You can create so many different shades just with one or two colors, but just by being judicious with the amount of water you add, adding more water, adding less water, putting that marker directly to the paper and intensifying the color. So we're going to die cut this image, but I want to put it on a colorful card base. So I am adding just some kind of, it's almost an icy Arctic blue color. And I am putting that just around the areas that I know will be die cut. But it's easier to do with that paintbrush, so I add some color and then I kind of move the color around with my damp paintbrush so that it's a little bit easier to maneuver and I don't have to worry about the color bleeding from the pink flower to the blue area. So now I'm going to die cut this with the coordinating die for the Celebrate Rose Corner. I love that there are dies for these huge floral stamp sets that I have illustrated. I think that's such a great feature. And it's perfectly sized to fit at the front of an A2 card base. So now I have some Hero Arts Arctic cardstock. This is a really lovely shade of pale aqua blue. And I am heat embossing in silver again with some of the sentiments that I designed for the Celebrate Rose Corner stamp set. I designed them to have sending and celebrate, and then there are a few different coordinating sentiment strips that coordinate with them. So it's sending all my love, sending happy birthday wishes, sending congratulations or condolences and hugs. Many different options for your sentiments. So this is kind of a one-stop shop for your sentiment needs. So I am cutting the sending sentiment out with my sharp scissors. I'm fussy cutting it because that sentiment strip, it just had a little bit too much cardstock, and I want to put this on top of my Rose Corner watercolored image. So I don't want to cover too much of that up since we worked so hard on getting that depth and dimension really contrast really nice. So I'm just putting some foam tape on the back of the Rose Corner, and I'm going to adhere it to a full-size A2 panel of the Hero Arts Arctic cardstock. And that icy blue that we added around the edge of the flowers really matches perfectly with that cardstock. That was totally an accident, but it was a happy accident, as Bob Ross likes to say, or liked to say. So now I am just adding my sentiment die cuts, and I'm going to add a few gems, coordinating pale blue gems to the card, and then we're finished. A relatively easy card, but it, excuse me, it really makes such a difference when you use the palette to extend the colors that you have available with your watercolor markers. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments or send me an email. And you can check out full color photos and more details on my blog at emilymidget.com. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe hit the subscribe button so that you see some more content from me in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.